as I had predicted 4 years earlier. In May 2005, oil was priced at $44 per barrel, and in July 2008, crude oil reached $147 per barrel. Oil production in July 2008 was 0.2% higher than in May 2005. That wasn't exactly what we learned in Econ 101. Tripling the price brought out only a trivial amount of additional oil. The chant of "Drill, baby, drill" at the 2008 Republican National Convention had a hollow ring to it. Economists and geologists have a long-standing disagreement about the availability of resources. I worry that the emphasis on economic growth stems from their operating the U.S. government as an enormous Ponzi scheme. I'm not alone in that concern. I looked up Social Security Ponzi on Google and got 310,000 hits. It's just a geological accident that oil caused the problem. It might have been phosphate instead. OPEC would have been the organization of phosphate-exporting countries with exports from Morocco as number 1 and the United States as number 2. A phosphate crisis would have been enormously more disruptive than too little oil. Although I grew up in oil fields, I barely recognized the oil industry as it is today. When I was young, the major oil companies, the Seven Sisters, dominated exploration, production, refining, and marketing. The majors generated wealth by finding and owning giant oil fields. Today, national oil companies dominate most of the oil-productive areas. Whereas the major oil companies used to operate large corporate research laboratories, innovation now comes largely from service companies like Schlumberger and Halliburton. The Seven Sisters are still around, although some of them have been absorbed through mergers. In a sense, each major now consists of skilled professionals with a merchant bank attached. Quote, "We'll work for a small share of oil," end quote. Although M. King Hubbert is regarded as the patron saint of the peak oil crowd, his methodology and his conclusions are still the subject of criticism and skepticism. It's important not to claim that Hubbert is infallible. I point out several flaws in his work in this book. Of the many Hubbert critics, Richard Nehring published one of the most detailed analyses, and his critique is backed by data. I explain in Chapter 2 how Nehring's analysis runs afoul over small sample statistics. An original contribution in Chapter 1 of this book is an attempt to supplement the logistic bell-shaped curve, the one that Hubbert used, with a similar justification for the Gaussian bell-shaped curve. The Gaussian curve has a wider top and narrower tails. An evaluation of several different bell-shaped curves, using several datasets and several fitting methods, was done in 2007 as a Princeton senior thesis by Benjamin Steiner. Steiner's conclusion was that all combinations of math, data, and methodology gave essentially the same results for the next 10 years. Oil prices are a subject of never-ending interest. Chapter 4 discusses the total annual price paid for crude oil as a percentage of the gross domestic product. Oil costs during the 1990s were less than 1% of GDP. Those years brought us the SUV gas guzzler. Oil costs exceeded 4% of GDP in 1981 and again in 2008. Both of those price spikes caused extensive damage to the U.S. economy. Oil prices have a selective impact on various countries. In particular, Iran and Venezuela need a price above $70 per barrel to support their national adventures. In most of the world, low oil prices and the possibility of even lower prices have forced the postponement or cancellation of a substantial number of oil projects. There are some bits of good news from the oil patch. The question is whether they are just a small amount of good news embedded in a larger mass of bad news. The bad news is that the supergiant oil fields that supply much of our oil are getting older and declining in production. For oil, I suspect that the good news is not good enough. It is not a game changer. For natural gas, the good news might be the opening of an era of increased supply. The best oil news comes from offshore Brazil. Petrobras, the Brazilian national oil company, has made a string of remarkable new discoveries of light high-grade oil, possibly the biggest discoveries since 1976. However, the wells are very deep.